Yes, we're back for part 2 here and on Leading Our Own Way with my first ever neuroscientist. I'm so happy. The author of Death by Comfort. We're living in a world that tells us to avoid stress at all costs. But what if the real key to mental fitness is learning to embrace it? That's exactly what Paul Taylor's research is uncovering. In part 1 yesterday, we explored Paul's background and how Death by Comfort challenges everything we believe about struggles. And resilience, of course. Now in part 2, we're diving into the science behind it, how stress, discomfort, and even failure can make us stronger. Paul is currently completing a PhD in applied psychology, where he's developing resilience strategies with the Australian Defence Science Technology Group and the University of Newcastle here in Australia. He has a UK accent just like myself, slightly different, of course, but we're both living here. He also spent years working with elite organisations from the Australian military to Fortune 500 companies, teaching leadership, performance and stress fitness. Today we're going to be talking about why hardiness, love that word, hardiness matters, and why happiness isn't the goal and how we can rewire our minds for strength and adaptability. So let's jump right in. Here's Paul and myself. But my state of long-term happiness hasn't disappeared. I've just dipped for 5 minutes. And because I've worked on myself so much, I can take myself off and get myself grounded or balanced again and get myself back to how I'm feeling, getting myself to a cellular level, what do you call it? Homeostasis level, within, because I go and work on myself. But yeah, we tend to, I don't know, what would you think around happiness then? Because that's my take on happiness.
Yeah, so for me, it's not, and look, I'm being a bit pernickety here, but it's not a goal of mine.
Yeah.
A goal of mine is about contentedness.
Yes.
Right? I think that because happiness is that kind of positive emotional state that we cannot be in all the time, but you can be contented all the time. So there's a fundamental difference, I think, between the two.
Yeah.
Whereas happiness is the peak, whereas contentedness is more like a steady, more of a steady state. So that for me is what I aspire, is about being contented in life rather than this happy state. And again, it's just because the word happy has been infused into our brains. So I'll give you an idea around this. In the year 2000, there was, I think it was 1 or 2 books that were published on happiness. Actually, it was less than 50, right, that were published. And now there are well over 10,000 books published on happiness, right?
I've got one.
So it's just, the word is just overused and it's marketed, and then marketeers jump on the bandwagon of it. And so the ancient Greeks, they had very clear views around this. It started with Aristotle, was continued by the Stoics. So they talked about eudaimonia, right? Eudaimonia, which was about what they called the good life. And for the ancient Greeks, there were 2 components to that. There was this whole idea of hedonic happiness or satisfaction, and then they had the eudaimonic stuff. So the hedonic stuff was having positive emotions, being satisfied with life, those sorts of things. But the eudaimonic stuff, which is the deeper stuff, would be things like social integration, self-acceptance, acceptance of others, social growth, sense of meaning and purpose, right? Contribution to society. All of those things that we know are more enduring when it comes to happiness in inverted commas, right? But I think what we should be doing, and what the serious researchers do, they don't really talk about happiness. They talk about subjective well-being, right? Or what those ancient Greeks talked about, the good life. And so for way back in Aristotle, there were clear distinctions between the sort of short-term positive emotions, being satisfied and having those positive emotions, with the longer-term enduring stuff that really helps with the good life. And you need a bit of both, but it turns out you need 1 of 3 from the hedonic side of things and 6 out of 11 from the eudaimonic side of things. And it's come full circle now. So Martin Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, it's at Penn State University. There's the whole global positive psychology movement, which you'll have heard of, and there's positive education. all that strength-based stuff. And they talk about character strengths now, right? Underneath a set of virtues. So the Stoics used to have 4 virtues. Modern positive psychologists have identified 6 virtues, of which all of these character strengths lie underneath it, right? And it's then about focusing on your strengths and amplifying your strengths. That's where the whole positive psychology movement has come from. But it is full circle back to the time of Aristotle and the ancient Greeks and the Stoics.
We'll do another full circle as well, though. We'll just keep going around, won't we? Do you not
Absolutely.
think? Yeah. I could talk about all this all the time. I really could. We could get real deep, and we will come back to it. Let's just quickly get into yourself, Paul. Let's talk about what you do on a daily basis. For those who don't know who you are, you've got the Paul Taylor podcast, which I advise everybody to tune into. But what else do you do in your life?
Yeah, so look, my main role these days is I'm a corporate speaker, so I'm a professional speaker. I do everything from keynote talks at conferences for an hour all the way to half day, full day, 2-day workshops, whether it's with leadership teams or it's around business. And I work in the space of where I call it where resilience / hardiness meets peak performance, but also meets well-being. So I'm interested in where those 3 things come together. But really, my kind of key role on that, so as well as that, I have my podcast and I'm finishing off my PhD, but my key role in all of this is to help people become better versions of themselves. So I call myself a pracademic. That's kind of my overarching theme.
Yeah.
I love to dig into the geeky academic research and then actually go, okay, how can I use this? What tool can we bring out of this? What knowledge can I transfer to people to help them become better versions of themselves?
Fantastic. What made you do all of this, though? What was the root cause to your journey?
Look, I think I can bring it back to my time in the armed forces. And it was, I think the catalyst of it, or the thing that sent me down this path was 8 friends of mine getting killed in a helicopter crash, or 8 colleagues, and 2 helicopters that flew into each other, and 2 very, very good friends of mine were in that helicopter, and I was very lucky not to be in that helicopter. I had been in the same squadron as those guys, used to fly a lot with 2 of the guys who were in one of the helicopters, and there's a fair chance I would have been in it. The only reason I wasn't, we had been on a particular squadron in Prestwick in Scotland. We'd moved down to Cornwall together to go on to another squadron and went out on the aircraft carrier to the Gulf. And then I got a call to say somebody has been medically discharged up in Scotland. Do you want to take their search and rescue role? And search and rescue is the best job in the Navy, particularly for my role in search and rescue in Scotland, particularly. Yeah. So I jumped at the chance. So my mates all went out to the Gulf and I didn't. And anyway, they ended up, and it was, there was a number of things that were behind it, but ultimately, I think it was an unavoidable incident. And it made me then just decide that I was on a kind of a decision point at that stage, because I'd been a short career commission, which is 8 years for aircrew. And I had to decide whether I was going to go full career or whether I was going to leave the Navy. And when that happened, I actually, for me, that was the deciding factor. I said, I don't want other people to be in charge of my destiny. Yeah. And I had been up in Scotland, and my secondary role was sports officer. So I took it upon myself to write a well-being newsletter. I already had my master's in exercise science. At this point, I'd started doing a part-time master's in nutrition up in Glasgow. And so I just started writing a well-being newsletter. And I remember I was walking across the parade ground one day, and this old chief stopped me, and he said, thank you, he said, for that newsletter. He says, it had a big impact on me, and it had a big impact on my family, including my kids. Thank you. And he just walked away, and something in my head just went, that's what I want to do. I want to be helping people. And so I actually went home that night and I wrote a tombstone statement right? And my tombstone statement was military man turned educator to help others with their well-being, which I have now tweaked to military man turned educator to help others be better versions of themselves, right? So that for me is a clear path, a clear sense of meaning and purpose that drives a lot of what I do, both in my personal life, but also mostly professionally. But it's also around, personal life, my wife, my kids, how can I help my friends? How can I help them be better versions of themselves? And it's not to say that I'm a guru and I'm perfect, but I do have this knack of being able to take research and then to translate it into things that are useful for people, and seem to be able to communicate that reasonably effectively.
Yeah, that's amazing. Beautiful story as well, and tragic, but it was clearly that your defining purpose, wasn't it? What do you think of that notable well-being paper that you wrote that the gentleman read and changed his life? What would you think? What were some of the key points? If I was to read that, I know you probably
I can't even remember what it was. I think it was something about good nutrition and something particularly with kids. I don't even remember. It was that long ago. It was probably 23 years ago, 22 years ago, something like that. So
with you mentioned that you wrote a little bit about nutrition within it. Do your points of view of nutrition then versus now, has that changed, or are you still on pretty much the same path?
There has been a bit of change around it. It's become more, but I think the advice has changed overall. The overarching theme on nutrition has shifted because of the insidious rise of ultra-processed foods, which I think there is compelling. In fact, there was an umbrella review, which is a review of systematic reviews, which is where you get the best form of evidence when it comes to observational stuff, right? And so in nutrition, very rarely do you get very strong evidence about something, right? And there's lots of controversy with stuff, but there's lots of vested interest, which we can go into or not later. But this umbrella review concluded that there was class 1, which is convincing evidence, which you rarely see in the world of nutrition. Class 1 evidence that increasing ultra-processed foods increased significantly the risk of a whole host of chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease by almost 50%. But particularly for today, the notable things: anxiety by 48%, common mental health disorder by 53%, right? And so for me, we have this class of foods that are highly palatable. And the way I describe ultra-processed foods, my terminology is is high HI. I talk about human interference.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just basically, if you're looking at a food, has this clearly been alive and minimally interfered with by humans, right? Mm-hmm. So, people get it. Any bits of meat, fish, vegetables, fruit, and whole grains such as oats, barley, quinoa, those sorts of things clearly have been alive and minimally interfered with by humans. But breakfast cereals, cakes, pastries, biscuits, sweets, supermarket breads, all of these things, high human interference. And there is so much evidence that these things disrupt our gut microbiome, cause weight gain, but also drive metabolic disease and dysfunction and mental health issues. And I see, and my frustration is the massive increase that we're getting in people, especially kids, who are going on to medications for mental health disorders, which all have significant side effects. And most of it is coming from the fact that they're eating shit food and not exercising and spending too much time on screens and not sleeping well. And you throw those things together, right? So if your diet is crap, and by the way, in Australia, more than 50% of all calories consumed are from ultra-processed foods and drinks, right? So to clarify that, the last proper survey was 2008, and we were at 42%. We know in America and in Britain, it's closer to 60%, and for teenagers, it's 66%. And we know that our sales in a proportion is similar to theirs. So even though we haven't tested it, I can tell you it's above 50%, right? And I say to people, good luck with your mental health if half of all the food you're eating is shit food, and you're not moving well, and you're not sleeping well because you're spending too much time on a screen, especially you're bringing it into your room, right? You do that for 6 months, you'll friggin' feel a whole host of exams around mental health disorders, right? So that for me is the big issue, and it's my frustration, but it's also my passion, is trying to educate people that you cannot put shit into this body and not stimulate it the way that the genome requires and expect to have a good outcome in terms of your physical and your mental health.
I have to be careful what I say here, because a lot of educators and leaders and Department of Education might watch this because they know I do it and they know I still work in school. So I'm going to get you to say it all, if that's okay.
Not a problem. I'm happy being a disruptor, mate. I bet, yeah. So case in point, I did a school yesterday. A bunch of teachers, great people, loved doing the presentation, but the food that they had at break time and was absolutely shit food.
You're talking about the kids or the teachers now?
No, for the teachers.
Yeah.
And I know a number of teachers, and they'll say, like, it's so hard because in the staff room, there's always frigging cakes and all of that stuff. It's like, why do you have to have shit food in there? And there's lots of businesses that are like that, right? Yeah. They bring in stuff that you think, oh, this would make people feel good, but it's actually destroying their frigging brain health and their mental health and their physical health as well.
I'm guilty of it because I go to one school sometimes and I get a call and go there on a Monday. I'm like, oh, don't send me there on a Monday because they do the morning teas, and I'm like, there's lollies and sweets and beautiful cakes and I have to get it, so I try and stay away, and then it's horrible.
This stuff is it's tempting, right?
It's addictive.
But it's a bigger thing that we associate shit food with reward. Yeah. And particularly setting up that loop in kids' brains. You know, if you're good, I'll buy you an ice cream or blah, blah, blah. And it's setting up the wrong loop. But anyway, that's another rabbit hole.
Well, this conversation is shifting perspectives in a big way, and we're just getting started, because in part 3, we're looking at the connection between mental health, nutrition, and physical resilience, and how what we eat, I talk about it a lot, I'm reading a book currently about it, but affects our brain, and why processed foods are damaging our mental fitness, and what we can do to build stronger bodies and minds. I see it every day at schools. Kills me. Please, let's look at it deeper. The science is here, so trust me, if you care about your health, and you need to hear what Paul has to say next. See you in part 3. Join us tomorrow to hear more from today's incredible guests and learn valuable insights to help you lead your own way. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you then.